Today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to go into Fusion and we're going to play with stills. Yeah, I know, stills aren't necessarily the most fun thing to do or talk about inside of a video project, but we're going to try to change that today. Rather than just zooming in or panning on a still or just sitting on a still, we're going to turn it into a 3D object and we're going to give it some parallax motion. We're going to give a little bit of difference between a foreground and a background on a 2D still image. Now this is a great technique anytime you're given a still and the producer or the director says, what can you do with it? It takes a little bit of work, but once you get the basics of this technique down, you get very quick at learning what stills are a good option for parallax. I've done them on archival photos, black and white color, brand new photos, action photos, portraits, doesn't matter. They can all get turned into parallax with a pretty good degree of success. So let's jump into Fusion and see what we can do.
Okay, we are inside Fusion Studio, and as with any parallax effect, the first thing we're going to need is a still image to play with. So let's go over, let's get a loader node, and let's go find a still image. This is a still image I have downloaded off of the internet. Now, this is a beautiful photo. I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. I downloaded this from a site called wildlifephototours.com. Check them out. They're a very cool looking website. They basically help you, give you tips on taking photos on safaris, and I believe they make arrangements to take you on safaris as well. wildlifephototours.com. Check them out. Okay, something to keep in mind, not every photograph is going to be perfect for parallax. One of the items you really need to consider is the resolution of your photograph. The one we're dealing with here, 2000 by 1250 in a 1920 by 1080 frame, is actually a little smaller than I would want. So this photo definitely will fit on the outside of our 1920 by 1080 image, but it doesn't leave us a lot of room to play around with this. As with most things, especially dealing in photographs and video, bigger is always better. Now, the other thing we want to be concerned with, or that we want to take into consideration, is the photograph itself. What can we do with this photograph? With any photograph you want to use in parallax, you need a bare minimum of 2 planes of information to play with here. That's what parallax is, the difference between 2 different planes as the camera is moving around the photo. We're looking for a bare minimum of foreground and a background. And we can see on this one, we have a nice foreground of the tree, we have some foreground leaves, we have the main subject being the tiger, and we have the background of the foliage in the background. So we have, in essence, we could play with 4 different planes within this shot. We will, however, start on a simpler area of this photograph, and we're just going to deal with 2 planes to begin with, and then maybe we'll work our way up. Let's try to do a parallax between the tree and the tiger. To do that, we're going to need 2 different versions of the photograph. So we'll just copy and paste that. One will become the tree, one will become the tiger. So we're going to separate these 2 out. And inside Fusion, that will simply be a mask effect. So we'll mask off the tree. The camera's not moving, so I wouldn't really call it a roto, but I suppose you could call it a roto as well. We're going to mask off the tree, separate it from the tiger. So bring in a polygon tool. We won't connect it up to anything at this point. Make sure we're looking at the tiger. Select our polygon, and we're just going to draw our shape and outline this tree stump. And you know the typical rules here. Take as long as you want. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. Not too dirty, not too perfect. It's just a tree limb. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I will just speed this up a little bit. Didn't really take me that long, but we've sped it up so that it took even less time. We will now connect the mask to the tiger, to one of those layers, and we now see that we only have a tree. Now the question becomes, if we look at our original photo, is the tiger behind the tree or is the tiger under the tree? It's a little hard to tell from the photograph, but for our purposes, we're going to say the tiger is behind the tree by a few feet. And something else to take a note of here, there is a very small piece of foliage on this corner of the tree. It's not a huge issue, but as the camera moves, that's going to be stuck to the tree, so we're going to want to get rid of that, just to clean that up a little bit. So we'll go and we will call up a paint tool, make sure we are looking at the paint tool. We're going to set ourselves up for a stroke, not a multi-stroke, which it usually defaults to. We just want a stroke. We want the clone tool. And as I hold down the Alt button on Windows, that will grab my area that I want to clone from. And I can now clone out this leaf. Now we're using a stroke instead of a multi-stroke because the stroke will repeat itself for every frame of the timeline inside Fusion. If I had done multi-stroke, it would actually just do one particular frame or a number of frames that I can dictate before I start drawing. Now the next thing we need to do is to delete this tree from the tiger version of the photograph. Now you could cheat and just try to delete the edges of it here. Just work your way up and lose some of the edges of the tree, and then that is the amount you can move your camera around. In a perfect world, we're going to remove this entire tree. Again, take as much time as you want to on this. The more work you put into it now, the better off your entire parallax effect is going to be. If there is no tree on the tiger version of this shot, then you almost have unlimited camera motion. Now we're just going to do the same thing. We've added a paint tool, and we're just cloning from directly underneath the tree and copying it over. I'm speeding it up obviously a lot right now, but in the end, I think this entire process might have taken me about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect because what we're painting is actually not our focus of view in the picture. This is all in behind the tiger. The tree will be in front of a lot of this still once the final product is done. And you'll be amazed at how much you can get away with when you paint some of these backgrounds out. So 10-15 minutes later, and we have totally removed the tree from the shot. There's a couple areas here, maybe copy some more foliage over too. And another thing we can do just to soften this background, I'm going to bring a blur in and add it after my paint node. And we'll put it on the correct node here. We don't want to blur the tree. We want to blur the background of the tiger. So we're going to start just by blurring the entire image. And then we will just draw a little mask around the area of the background that we want that blur to affect. And it's just a rough edge. We'll soften, we'll feather the edges out again. It's nothing groundbreaking what we're doing here. We're just making it a little softer in some of those paint strokes that we had done. And just by softening the edge, so now we have the tiger in focus, and we feather out to a little bit of an out of focus background. And just there is the blur on, and there's the blur off. So that works just fine for us. That now gives us two planes. We have one that is our tree, and we can composite that over top of the tiger. And if we were to simply do that, take the tree, put it on top of the tiger, that'll give us a merge. That merge basically puts us back at the original image. So you might be saying, what was the point of doing all that paint? Well, this isn't actually the type of merge we want to do right now. We need to get both of these items into a 3D world so that we can have a 3D camera manipulate around them. So we're going to take each end node on this one, the paint node, and we're going to put it into a 3D plane. And this one, the last node in our tree right now, is a blur node, and we're going to put that into a 3D plane. So now we're going to take these two planes and we're going to merge those together, and that gives us a 3D merge. So now we are looking at two planes in a 3D world that we can move our way around. Now, right now, we can't see the tree branch because the two planes are actually lined up perfectly on top of each other. So we're going to have to take that tree plane and we're going to have to move it forward in space, and then bang, it pops into our frame. Simply by moving it even a 1 pixel ahead of the background plane. Now, in our world, we're going to want that tree branch to be a little bit farther forward. The farther forward we move that tree away from the background, the more of a parallax effect we're going to be able to get when our camera moves around. And even just rotating around it like this, you can see how different angles make that branch appear at different spots on the background. That's why we went to all that trouble to paint out the background. No matter what angle we look at this on, we still see what appears to be the original shot of the tiger in the background. Now, I'm just manipulating the space within Fusion right now, but we're going to want to put an actual camera in here and manipulate that. So let's set that up. Because where these end up sitting in comparison to each other is going to be crucial as to how we get this entire effect to work. So from our Merge 3D, we're going to add another item, and that is going to be a Render 3D node. We need this to see our final image. This now becomes the actual output of our shot. Even without a camera attached, it is showing us what we are going to render out of this scene. And we can see that right now we're at UHD. We just need to set that down. We're just going to do a 1920 by 1080. So in the renderer, we're going to change the output to 1920 by 1080. And of course, the other thing that we need, if we look at the merge in the other screen, there's one thing I really like about Fusion is you can look at the same item from different angles in two different screens at the same time. I just brought in a camera 3D, which we can now see the camera right on top of our image planes. It's a little too close to our image planes, which is why we don't see anything. But as I pull the camera back, now our image comes into focus. So now as I move this camera around, because we made our renderer 1920 by 1080, our camera is going to show us how a 19 by 20 by 1080 picture will frame up. So we can now frame up the camera almost like you're looking at a monitor. So if we were to say this is how big we want the tree branch to be, we can see that the tiger's not quite big enough. So we can go and we can resize the plane of the tiger, blow him up a little bit. And that'll bring the tiger, it won't bring the tiger closer to the camera, but it'll make it a little bigger. This is where the bigger the resolution, the better off you are on this background picture. And we can also bring it forward if we want, and that does the same effect, but a little different way of doing it. So let's just set up what we want to call our base of the tiger position. We'll say that's right about there. And I can see just a little edge of the tree branch is hidden, or is showing through the edges there on the top left-hand corner. So we're going to move that tree branch maybe forward just enough to fill that frame as well. And we'll drop it down just a hair. We still obviously want it to be near the top of the frame. We want to see mostly the tiger's head throughout most of this shot. we're going to take the position of this shot and we want to frame it up how we want this to be, left, right, up, down type thing. We've got the size, but is this where we want the camera to start from? So we have to decide, do we want this to be a tracking shot, a dolly shot, a jib shot? What do we want to do with this camera? We could just dolly in and you get a really nice parallax effect. I'm partial to the jib shots where we kind of start high and come in low, or start low and move up high. I think it gives you the best of, both worlds in a parallax to get as much motion out of these items as possible. So let's try to set up a jib move with this camera. So I'm going to bring the camera up and tilt it down, and I'm just going to play with the positioning here for a second, get it all lined up for the start of my shot. So, wrong way. There we go. And it's just a little back and forth until we get where we want this to start. Go over as far as we can on the edge. So we'll call this our first shot. We're going to take our camera 3D node, go over to the transform tab, and we're going to set an animation. So we're going to animate all three of our properties here, just in case we do change something else. So they've all been animated. A keyframe has been set at position 1. Now on our timeline, let's go ahead, maybe 180 frames. And this will be the end of our shot. Now, because we've set the camera into animation mode, as soon as we move the camera, it will automatically create a keyframe for us at the next position. So we'll have the camera dolly in and come down, and we will have to tilt up. Again, just a little back and forth until we're happy with the position. Just want to do enough movement that we get some dynamic motion out of the shot, not so much that we start getting a headache from all the movement. So we can see it has added animation points to everything we've changed. On our timeline, we can back up. It'll go automatically to first position. We can see, kind of go back and forth. Just going to set a playback range here and do a little preview. Get it to cache into the system. And you can really see the parallax as that tree branch moves above the camera, exposing the tiger behind it. So that's pretty cool. Now, in a real world situation, of course, camera doesn't just start and stop on a dime. So we're going to want to go into the spline editor and select our camera animations and set these to be an ease in and ease out, or in Fusion it's actually called smooth points, or smooth. There's a couple of different smooth settings we can play with here. So we'll select point and we're going to go up to smooth right there. So that gives us a smooth, or what if you're used to After Effects, an ease in, ease out type motion. Now, another way of bringing a little bit of realism on this is to have the camera actually do a rack focus as it moves in. So we're going to turn on the accumulation effect and turn on depth of field, adjust the amount of depth of field way down, and usually I crank the quality pretty high. And now if I move around to the side on our Merge 3D view, again, this is the beauty of having two different views at once. We're going to want to set the rack up to have the focal plane on the tree at the start and then shift as the camera moves to the tiger plane at the end. So let's just go and find our visibility control and turn on the focal plane. So the green box that we see back here is where the camera's focus is occurring. So we need to bring that forward and line it up with our tree branch. And if we go and we adjust the, not the focal length actually, we want to adjust the focal plane. And we'll bring that up to the tree. And again, because we can look at it from both the side and the front view or the monitor view at once, we can see the effect that that tree is in total focus. And our green bar is basically spanning the tree, which is on just a slight angle. So the green bar is intersecting the tree. So we know the tree is pretty much as in focus as it can be. So we'll just make sure we are at the head of our shot, and we will add an animation to this. Okay, we're going to go to the end of our shot now, and we're going to do the same thing. Again, because we have it animating, it will automatically set another keyframe, and we're going to bring that plane of focus and line it up with the actual tiger. That puts the tiger in focus at the very end of the shot. Now we'll just have to adjust this a couple of points along the way, because at some point as the camera moves, the focal plane moves as well. We want it to be in focus at the very end. We might want it to be in focus 30, 40, 50 frames ahead of the end of the shot as well. So we'll just make sure that we have a couple of keyframes for the focal plane. And let's do a preview of this. So we've rendered out a preview play. We have hit the play button. So we're now looking at a preview of cached files in our right-hand monitor. We'll set it to loop. So here's a loop of that motion. We can see the tree branch is in focus at the head, and as the camera moves in and under the tree branch, the tiger comes into focus. Now we could save that preview. We're just going to remove it. That takes this screen back to being controlled by our timeline. Now I said you needed 2 planes for this to work properly, but we could just as easily add a third plane pretty quickly. 4 planes perhaps. If we wanted to do a third plane, an easy one to do would be our grass or our leaves, rocks, whatever it is in the foreground. So let's duplicate our original shot one more time. And we're going to use this foreground area, the leaves or the rocks, and we're going to mask those out with a nice simple polygon tool. And it's a pretty rough shape, so again, I'm not spending too much time on that. It's the same process as we did with the tree. Mask it out, put it into a 3D plane, adjust it in our 3D world to where it's in front of the branch. So now you can see very easily, if we wanted to, we could mask out the tiger and just have the foliage in behind the tiger moving, and just have the camera being focused on the tiger. You know, the possibilities are endless at this point as you start breaking this up into planes. You just kind of have to look at the shot and decide where the planes are that you can break up. And we're going to finish this off. We'll put a saver on it, and we'll save it as a QuickTime movie. Give it a name and a location. render this baby out.
There you go, taking a 2D photograph into Fusion and turning it into 3D with some camera motion, some parallax. I love doing this. Clients love when you do this to their photographs as well. They don't usually expect it the first time you show it to them, and they're usually really impressed with the overall effect. Now, the more work you're willing to put into the masking and the painting of those photographs, the more dynamic moves you can do. Let me know what you think of today's thing. Leave some comments below. Leave like button if you want to hit the like button. If you don't like it, hit the dislike button. Whatever floats your boat. Thanks for watching.